Welcome to SouthPod, the first and foremost podcast created to tell the true story of tech innovation in the American South. SouthPod is hosted by John Yarian and Stanfield Gray and produced by Dig South Tech Media. Dig South Tech Media is the South's tech hub, the place where leading global brands connect with the most scalable startups. Visit us at digsouth.com and follow us on social media at DigSouth. The following episode features Nicholas Mancini, Manager of North American Business Development at Oracle for Startups. Now let's dig into SouthPod with Nicholas Mancini.
Hello everyone, we are back here with SouthPod. I am your host Stanfield Gray, and today we have Nick Mancini from Oracle for Startups. I got to ask you right off the bat, is there any relation to the composer Henry Mancini?
I have gotten that at least a couple times a year since I was a kid. My dad likes to say yes, but unfortunately, no, it's not true.
Yeah, well, for your dad's generation, you know, Peter Gunn, Pink Panther,
yeah,
Breakfast at Tiffany's, all those super famous songs of his generation, everybody is familiar with. That's cool.
There's also a boxer named Boom Boom Mancini who we sometimes get the question as well. But again, no, unfortunately.
Right, Boom Boom Mancini. And the other one I thought of was Roberto Mancini, the manager of Italy's national football team, the soccer team. So he's kind of a star as well. Well, it's fun to start the show during this, this time with setting the stage. Where are you today physically?
Where am I literally sitting right now? Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And how has your work life changed? Were you already, reaching out to startups via Zoom, setting up meetings? Were you already working remotely, or is this a big transition for you as well?
So I've actually been working remote since mid-2018 because that is when I founded my first startup. So was used to either working at a living room, an office, a coffee shop, a conference, wherever it may be. So I had a little bit of that feel going on. This is completely different because that was usually broken up by travel, meetings, events, what have you. And now it is purely virtual, which was nice, and I think my dog enjoys it much more than I do, but it's beginning to take a little bit of a toll. But I'm noticing people are getting more used to it and are opening up more virtually. And now that we're seeing virtual conferences and Zoom kind of update some software and a bunch of other technologies pop up for collaboration and virtual conferencing, it's becoming a little bit more normal. But man, I miss that personal feel of meeting someone in person. And getting some business done and learning more about what they're working on. Yeah,
I mean, Dig South produces Dig South Tech Summit in Charleston annually, and Oracle is one of our primary sponsors. And that's one of the things we're thinking through is what does it look like today in terms of the relationship with your sponsors and clients and members, and can you do the same things and virtually that you did in person, or is the new normal going to be a hybrid type of event where we interact with each other? We can dive a little bit into that later, but first I want to hear more about your experience and your expertise, especially in emerging tech. So give us a little background before you join Oracle for Startups. You have experience in deep tech, blockchain, quantum, biotech. Where's the best place to begin? Where were you, let's say, 5 years ago?
Yeah, so 5 years ago, I was in college, actually, which is where my love for blockchain and cryptocurrencies came up. It was actually really simple. I was trading cryptocurrency, and it was just interesting to me. Started looking at the underlying technology, the impact it can have on changing legacy systems and centralized architecture. So it really interested me. Then that kind of led me to raise my hand in a lot of situations and eventually found myself in Deutsche Bank's innovation labs working on alternative data research, some blockchain implementation stuff, a little bit of quantum, a little bit of biotech, just kind of hosting events, bringing in experts, kind of trying to understand the landscape and what things may look like in 5, 10, 20 years. And that kind of, that was a very interesting experience. Got to talk to a lot of VCs, accelerators, and serve as a docking point between fintech companies and in a large bulge bracket bank. So very eye-opening in terms of how to solve business needs, how startups play a role in emerging tech and implementing new ideas, and the difficulties behind large companies implementing new things. So you learn a lot of the gaps and the missteps that either a big company makes when implementing new technology, or that a small company helps with when they're building new technology. So that was very interesting. But working for a large corporation has its ups and downs, so I wanted to try something new. And fortunately, I found a couple founders working on some alternative data and predictive analytics for cryptocurrencies, which is a little bit of what I worked on at DB. And we basically built extremely accurate algorithms for predicting the price of the top 100 cryptocurrencies. We sold that data to hedge funds, and we also use that internally to build up a very nice track record for ourselves. And then that was a very interesting experience because you get to run across the country, fundraising, thought leadership, kind of exploring this new landscape of alternative data and telling people the impact of predictive analytics and forecasting and how that is going to change the investment landscape as well, especially when you're embroiled in cryptocurrency and blockchain, when Bitcoin's all the rage and you've got everybody fighting in the nethers, whether it's good or bad. It's just a very interesting industry to be in, interesting vertical to find yourself in, because it's a combination of free market principles, capitalistic ideals, socialism, the whole 9 yards. And it kind of combines a lot of just beyond the economics or the technology. And that kind of opened my eyes to an entirely new world of business impact and personal impact for new technologies and new companies coming about. And that's kind of how I found Oracle for Startups. I was looking for something a little bit more personally rewarding, high impact, and found Oracle for Startups and understood their value offering to early stage companies, which would have been extremely beneficial to me as a young founder, having discounts and mentorship and an ecosystem that is supposed to help me thrive, all while building on, amazing cloud technology. I saw that in front of me and I said, I would love to be a part of this. And here I am today. So that's a bit of the quick version.
Before we dive into Oracle for Startups, what the program looks like, what are your thoughts currently on cryptocurrency adoption, wider adoption? And, all currencies are volatile, and there are underlying technologies, for blockchain that with various applications that ripple across many, many industries, perhaps all of them eventually. But currently, in terms of we're pumping, tons of cash into the economy. People are rethinking how they're deploying capital, what business will look like. What is the state of cryptocurrency currently, and how it fits into this kind of this new equation? So that's part one. And part two is, when do you think there would be a wider adoption of it by the general public?
Sure. So how does it fit in? And that's interesting because there's thousands of cryptocurrencies. So I think that to start, the easiest place to start with is Bitcoin, which was the first cryptocurrency, the first kind of public blockchain that was presented to society. And I think that under the underlying technology, what it brings to society in terms of a hedge against financial markets and an opportunity to help bank the unbanked or the underbanked. And that is an interesting aspect in terms of just basic economics. We've been forced to deal with the powers that be, and this is this is a purely free market play built on a consensus mechanism. It's crazy. The rest of it, Ethereum, Litecoin, Monero, we can get into the rest. Those value adds have yet to be proven, but they do represent similar things to Bitcoin. Just, speed, scalability, adoption are all kind of major questions. So when it comes to cryptocurrencies as a whole, the value add is yet to really be given. When it comes to Bitcoin, the one true cryptocurrency that represents what a public blockchain should be, what a cryptocurrency should be, I'm very bullish on that. And I think that it offers a great investment hedge. As we've seen Paul Tudor Jones say that, one of the best macro investors of all time, he's got a 2% Bitcoin allocation, which is a lot of money for him. So very interesting stuff. In terms of what it's going to take for larger adoption, for Bitcoin, that's going to be the Lightning Network, is making sure that small business owners and people like us can transact value for very low cost. Right, it can get expensive as it expands out. Then you're also seeing things like JPM Coin and Libra and banking the unbanked. So I mean, if you look at Asia or Africa, more people have cell phones than they have bank accounts. That's a huge problem. Cash, you cannot develop a society purely on a physical cash base. Impossible. So to do that and give people liquidity is an amazing aspect. Blockchain can do that, certainly. Do you need an Ethereum or a public blockchain to do it? Maybe not, but the nobility and the ability to implement that is there. It's just going to take time, effort, and capital. But it's going to be much easier than a JP Morgan coming in and taking over Africa. So that's where I think the value add is. And you just need, the adoption is going to come with lower fees, better infrastructure, and someone who is a Jamie Dimon figure to really back that system through and through.
So I guess the question is, if you were once in the business of predicting, let's say the top 100 cryptocurrencies and tracking them for hedge funds, why aren't you a crypto trillionaire by now?
Well, I think it's important to not share your whatever's in your bank account. That's certainly something you never want to do. So I'm not going to say whether I have -0 or infinity dollars. But I think, to me, to reverberate the last point that I made is, I like high impact. I like touching people's lives. I like assisting people. What I was doing, at DB was very business focused, solving pure business needs. What I was doing at the startup was solving my needs and, larger business needs. Now at Oracle for Startups, I'm solving other people's needs, and I'm understanding what founders are going through that I wish I had known when I was a founder, and passing that knowledge off. And that's a huge opportunity for me to not only share what I've learned so other people's don't, but also give people the foundation that I wish that I had so that they can do better than I did and faster. And that's how I think about it.
Great. Well, for people who may not understand the difference between an entrepreneurship program within a large company versus an accelerator, an incubator, what does that look like for Oracle, and how, why isn't Oracle just developing everything in-house? Why are they also running a program that helps launch and develop and grow startups?
Yeah, so I actually have to kind of describe this a lot, because when people hear accelerator, incubator, one, they generally take equity. Two, they stick you in an office that could be far away from where your team sits or where your home is. And right. Three, you have to dedicate a certain amount of time to that program. And all those things are generally good. With equity generally comes cash. With an office comes other entrepreneurs, and with time commitment comes ability or opportunity to meet others. And that's not discounting that at all. It's just a different appeal to certain founders depending on exactly where you are in your raise and customer acquisition and finding your product market fit. So it's very much a choice of preference. But to explain the difference between Oracle for Startups, we are very much kind of a hybrid digital accelerator. We don't take equity. We don't make you, we don't force you in a long-term commitment, and we don't move you out of your current seat, whether it's, wherever you are. So we give you the freedom to engage as much as you'd like to get out of the program, with the underlying understanding that we're all, with the goal of utilizing Oracle Cloud Infrastructure as an aspect of your cloud environment, whether that's a hybrid or strictly Oracle, where we don't really care. We just want a commitment to Oracle. And what we provide in return is obviously the discounts for cloud, but also mentorship, connection to venture capital, connection to Oracle's customers, PR and marketing, and all these are opportunities. They're not given. It's as much as you get as much as you give back. But the fact that it's there, that it's fully self-service, that we do not take, and we give nothing but opportunity to the founders that participate in our program. We feel that this value add is much beyond Techstars or Mass Challenge or something like that, because we can reach a much broader audience, and we have a little bit more of a different style instruments in contacting them. That doesn't mean that we can't refer them to Mass Challenge or Techstars if they're ready for that or that's their field. But what we represent is a very level playing field, and a very wide playing field for anyone to participate on and experiment and test and see if it's right for them.
Well, let's talk about the importance of community for a minute. So you're obviously building a community of startups and you're connecting them to mentors and other resources that help them grow. What is the importance of community for B2C products, B2B products? What are some ways you help them develop that community, and what are some of the tools you use to do that?
Sure. So community is an interesting topic, and there was a couple of crowdfunding experts that really opened my eyes back in 2017 and 2018 to the power of community, and especially coming out of the Reg A Plus offering that was created during the Obama administration for companies to generate fundraising without going through accredited investors. And for B2B products, this is, you may not want to focus on this too much, but it is important to keep the prospective individuals, the stakeholders who either want to invest or participate in your product or service, keep close together and feed them information. And that can be through, a newsletter, a WhatsApp channel, an email chain, or something like that. It's B2B is a little bit different, but if you're going B2C and you have a product that you think is going to touch a wide audience, but you don't have funding for it, or you don't have the product, fully built yet, what you need to do is start a community and see if that product has product market fit. The best thing to do, start a Slack channel, start a Discord channel, start a Telegram channel, start a WhatsApp channel. These are all scalable. They're manageable up to 1,000, 2,000 people. None of them are the perfect solution, but at least what you're doing is you've said you've got an idea, you're starting to build something, you're gathering people around this, and you're getting feedback in real time. And these people are constantly either going to be ambassadors for you, feedback loops, or just listeners for you to say these are coming up, and is this something that you would like, or here's my release date. And then you can turn that into a crowdfund, and that can be something that you do through a crowdfunding site, or that can be something that you do in private with the people that are participating. But what that gives you initially is an entire potential customer base that is already working with you along the entire product loop to give you feedback and participate during the process. And that way, when you have the finished product, you have a bunch of people who are already ready to buy in. And that's what investors love to see. If you have 100 sales or 1,000 sales before a product's even released, I would love to probably invest, something, and that's what people like to hear. Building a community is a bit different because content is key. You can't just advertise your product and expect people to come around it. So that involves bringing your friends in, bringing your colleagues, acting as moderators, keeping the topics broad, making sure that there is, if your product's focused in fintech, AI, insurance land, make it insurance focused, but add anecdotes about how insurance impacted you. Ask others to speak up, understand the landscape, and give people a sense of belonging. Once they have a sense of belonging and a connection to your product, they're hooked. There's no reason to go anywhere else. They're connected to you. They're connected to your service. At that point, then that's when you serve them the product and the service and continue to iterate and improve long-term. So what Oracle for Startups is trying to do is we're not exactly mimicking it in the sense of creating a WhatsApp or Telegram channel, but we're creating a community of entrepreneurs, as well as, venture capital firms, accelerators, and we're keeping them all within our network so that if a startup calls me and says, I need help with sales, I need help with marketing, well, I know who to connect them to as long as they check the right boxes before that. So community is important on our end, but we also would like to see companies that are building communities on their end, because you can't always lean on others. You have to a little bit, but to do it 100% is impossible. And that's where a community comes in, because you can lean on others, you can communicate to them, and they can give you immediate feedback that you sometimes can't get from someone who's not going to use your product or service.
So that's kind of a classic inbound marketing play in a sense. You're developing content, bringing them in, providing real value before you ask for anything or extract. Are you noticing any trends that are specific to the current state of the economy, what we're going through now? How are people rethinking how they're engaging with audiences when they're stuck at home, or they can't bring them into a retail store, or they can't, someone can't physically touch if it's hardware, of course, but even if it's software, they can't sit down with a salesperson the same way that they used to.
Yeah, so there's a few points on that. Hardware and physical retail is difficult. That's not my strong suit, so I won't touch on that too much. But what I will say is this is the best environment in the history of mankind to start a digital company. It's unbeatable. We see the best companies come out of the worst troughs of the global economy. I don't even need to name the names. 10 are coming to your mind right now. But back then, cloud infrastructure was not as built out as it is now. It was not as easily accessible. There were not programs like Oracle for Startups to give you 70% off for 2 years so that you can test and iterate your product. There were not the abundance of ecosystems and accelerators and community organizations to pitch, discuss, gather feedback, and meet other entrepreneurs, whether it's physical or digital. And on the other part, we were just having a design thinking session about how to increase our digital presence or change what we were doing from the physical realm to the digital realm. And it's not easy. It takes a lot of legwork. You got to utilize your PR marketing teams. And if that's you, if you're a founder, you're doing everything so that you've got, 10 things on your list. But what's easy to do is if you have some finesse with a laptop and an email list or whatever community you're currently in or run, you can reach a larger audience, and that's through tools like Zoom or Remo, or there's another one that for the Consensus Invest conference that they're using. But there's plenty of conference apps that go beyond Zoom to meet people. So if you're an Oracle or even you're, let's say, Series A company, but you've got a niche product, well, maybe other people would want to hear about that. And all it takes is reaching out to your investor or a couple clients or whoever. Will you spread this word? I'd love to host a virtual conference or a virtual meetup, or you just participate in something else. So you're not going to touch the customer the way that you would before, but flashy colors, interesting topics, not echo chambers, candid feedback, candid responses, typical people who may not generally be on a webinar or something like that. Like I see it's always VCs or investors telling people what the trends are. Well, I get it. I understand you've got to put your money in the right places, but I don't always want to hear from the people who already have the money. I want to hear from the people who are building the success stories, who have been in the trenches before. You want to hear that candid nature. And I think that's what we're all kind of begging for right now is where's the real, what real things are going on in the entrepreneurial world right now? Where's the hurt? Where's the pain? Where's the problem that I need to solve? And we all know that it's contacting an audience, but you have to think creatively, you have to think differently, and you have to use multiple tools at your disposal. So I think you at Dig South are actually a really good example of this. You pivoted from purely physical or not purely physical, hybrid physical to purely virtual. You're still reaching an audience. You're still doing the podcast. You've got multiple content streams going on, and you're bringing on interesting speakers to do that are typically not your normal ones. So I hope people understand what that impact brings, and hearing the candid nature from real people who have been in the real trenches, how much impact and inspiration that can bring to someone who's listening.
Well, that has been our exact focus from the beginning, is to bring in founders, executives at growth stage companies working in real time, not to have the classic war stories of the past, or and no knock on executive with a fantastic track record or a life coach or a lot of other people who bring fantastic mentorship. But we want people to connect with and build a relationship with somebody who's out there doing it. This morning I saw this, and here's how I'm reacting, and here's what's happening this quarter. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out. It's been really important to us. What are some?
Before you get into that note, I wanted to add one more thing, and it's on the topic of what you just mentioned. And we can't network, right? So we can go to these conference apps, but when someone speaks and someone's a candid entrepreneur or a candid person in whatever vertical environment they're in, this is our only way to reach out. So I can't come up to you at the end of a speech at a conference. I have to email you. So the fact that people are providing their email information, that are coming out and speaking about their woes or hardships or inspirations, that gives everyone else listening an opportunity to reach out and connect, because we have no other way to do so. So I think that's another great point I wanted to add, is people need to also break that barrier of contact anybody and everybody. We're all in our pajamas. We're all at home. We're all with our kids. We're all with our pets. We've got nothing else to do than respond to a note of a simple question or a simple ask. I welcome that very much to anyone listening.
It's a great point. What are some classic mistakes that startup founders make that some tips you could give that they should avoid, particularly now when resources are limited. It's a little more difficult to reach an audience. Maybe there's some things that you could recommend that could help them avoid some of those pitfalls.
Yeah, I think that the biggest one is just the quote unquote too early concept: fundraising too early, pitching too early, selling too early. I've been there. You're very excited. You've got a great idea. You have either an alpha or an MVP or an amazing idea that's maybe even on paper, and you want to tell the world. And that's the biggest mistake people make, is telling the world too quickly. Because when you're pitching to a VC, you only get one chance. You're pitching to an investor, maybe an angel, you generally only get one chance. You're pitching to a customer that I want to use your product. Well, the market is saturated with plenty of solutions. So if you're bringing something to me that's not ready for me to use, I do not care. Unless it is going to enormously change my life whenever it's presented to me. I just can't buy in until I understand what it's doing in its full form. So, and that goes back to the note of digital age, and this is a great time to do it. It's very low cost, low risk to build something out, to continue to iterate it. Now, if you want to gain feedback from somebody and not pitch, that's another thing. But you need to be conscious of what connections you're using and when you are, because network is key when you're building an early stage startup. And if you burn the stakeholders within your network too quickly, you can't go back and get a second chance to say, my 2.0 is here, will you relook at it again? Sometimes they make another investment, they get another inspiration, or where you're at is just, you're working too hard and not getting any response from the market, and that they don't want to invest. So that the timing is very ripe, and I can't give anyone one specific timeline or whatever. But I think you need to be very close to 1.0 before you really start to shove that out in the marketplace, because investors are spoiled right now. Uber raised, a bunch of money on a crappy app that was calling taxis to your office late at night. They got lucky, and that was a different environment. We are in 2020 now, where anyone can build anything. 16-year-olds are building better apps than some of the geniuses back in the early 2000s. And we all need to be very conscious about how our product impacts those that we're presenting it to. So that's the biggest thing for me. And I've been there and I've done it. I've been told no more times than I'd like to admit. And it's frustrating. And you want to avoid those frustrations, because you want to put that energy into building, designing, and gathering a customer base before you spend time and money where it doesn't need to be spent. So I think that's the biggest one. I think the second one is not participating in the entrepreneurial landscape enough. Founders that go to all the events, spend the 24 hours a day either working and then networking, those are the founders that are most successful. Sometimes you have a genius idea that's going to be a unicorn, or you're a previous founder and you kind of zoom through. But the best guys that did and gals, I should say, that did the grassroots style, a chug along, where they're everywhere. And sometimes these people don't have a good idea, but generally, if you see someone at enough events for 10 to 12 months, you start to understand this person is really about what they're saying. I mean, they are dedicated. And that dedication is not shown from one single event. It's not shown from showing up somewhere once. That dedication is shown to stakeholders from a repeated example of you buying into either the ecosystem, the individuals that are trying to teach and help bring you along, and the fact that you're there participating is extremely impactful sometimes. So even if your idea is not the best at first, or you don't have the most moxie or enthusiasm, if you're there participating, people will notice. And that just comes with time and commitment.
Well, the other side of that coin, the startups who do succeed and are gaining traction, doing well, let's circle back to the Oracle for Startups program. What are some success stories from that program you've seen?
Yeah, so I think one of our favorites, and this happens to be a startup that I help myself, is Aptiv.io. They're based out of the Northeast, and they're kicking actual butt. And they're very bought into the Oracle program. And we've actually, if you want to go to oracle.com/startup, Aptiv.io is one of the main featured startups. And I mean, if you want to talk about a company that knows how to acquire customers, knows how to build a product, knows how to get the most out of their cloud service provider, and knows how to further along a company and with the right steps, that's a great success story as well. We've got another one called Agro Scout, which I don't currently help myself, but I mean, they're in green tech and they're kicking butt. I believe they're They may be, I can't remember if they're out west or in Latin America, but that's another great example to look into as well. And we're actually working with a couple other startups that are working on some benchmarking for different cloud providers to show efficiency and cost savings. We're working on startups that are changing the music industry. We're working on a few startups. Blockchain and cybersecurity is exploding. We've got another one by the name of Credits that's doing that very interestingly with tokens involved. So we've got a lot of success stories kicking. So I'd say just in the North American region, we've got over 60 companies that are really chugging along super hard. And if you look globally, it's in the hundreds. And we've got thousands in the program, but there is a certain kind of level up process, and to see that kind of buy-in over the short 3-ish year tenure of the program is just absolutely insane. So the growth is great. Our time isn't even taken up as much because the program is so self-service and so given to the onus of the startup to participate, that it's very easy to manage all the different accounts as well, because they get to reap the benefits at their leisure, and they call upon us whenever they need the help and they need the assistance. And that gives us, it's a very tailored kind of white glove effect, and we don't need to constantly have conversations and do things. They're very smart, and we help where we can. And it's a very symbiotic relationship that continually fosters innovation, cost savings, and business opportunities for the startups that participate in our program.
Great. Well, if you'll share 3 to 5 of those companies with us and their links, we'll include it in the notes that we send out with the podcast.
Certainly.
It'll be great. So let's pivot back to bootstrapping versus fundraising for a minute. We've touched on that briefly, but what are some of your thoughts on when it's the right time to pitch, raise money, the best way to do that? And, and I'll give you an example. Right now, I'm hearing from some investors, they're looking at companies that have market traction, have revenue. Well, if I have a lot of revenue, I don't necessarily need an investor, right? I mean, I may to scale it to a certain point, or I may be happy with my progress in bootstrapping. What are some of the best ways to assess where I am in that phase of my development?
Yeah, so market share is very important, and I'll kind of dig into that secondary, but I think the bootstrapping versus fundraising, the best advice I heard early stage was no one is going to buy your product or invest in your product until you do. So bootstrapping is required in this day and age, unless you're a 10-time founder who's just absolutely killer and knows nothing but VCs in your Rolodex. You're not just going to raise money out of the blue. That rarely happens. Bootstrapping is required, and you should be able to self-fund for at least 6 months if you are going to jump off the cliff, so to speak, and quit everything else and go full-time. If you can't at least last 6 months, you're not going to last at all. And if you're moonlighting and you're fundraising and you're bootstrapping a little bit, then that's good, but eventually you're going to hit that tipping point, and you need to be prepared for it a minimum of 6 months, but I would recommend at least 12. So that's the biggest thing. You have to bootstrap. And then fundraising comes after you've shown that you can, 1, manage money, 2, that you can build a product, 3, that you actually understand the design and the inner workings of not only the product itself, but how the consumer reacts, the distribution, the marketing, and then obviously the stakeholders of managing the employees or the developers, as well as whether you have a friends and family investment or other partners as well. So, I mean, it's a lot to juggle, and you have to be able to show the management behind that, because if you piss money away, obviously no one's going to give you money because you've demonstrated an inability to manage cash correctly. So that's what investors look like a lot, because they are spoiled and because the market is saturated with entrepreneurs. It's just the way it is. So on the other topic, market share, companies that are gaining revenue can sometimes have a trouble finding investment, because sometimes companies are just uninvestable. This doesn't happen a lot, but there are products and services that are tough to scale out, and that's a tough thing to recognize. This is something that you can see very easy from watching Shark Tank. A lot of sharks will say you're uninvestable, and Shark Tank is not the best to get your anecdotes and your evidence from, but it's just funny that it happens often there. So sometimes your product's not scalable, and that's something that you need to be able to demonstrate during your bootstrapping or seed phases as well, because if you can't reach a large market share of customers efficiently, you don't have a business model. So market share is important, and we're seeing Uber and Amazon, they're the queens and kings of wasting money and going through, revenue deficits, I should say, basically losing billions and billions of money each year. But what they're doing is gaining market share. So you can gain market share by just spending exorbitant amounts of cash, or you can gain market share by utilizing the community example that I gave you before, which allows you to have a tried and true customer base and get committed sales prior to releasing the product. And that way you can demonstrate market share. And if you can demonstrate scalability, growth over time, and the fact that you can actually distribute that product or service to the people that already want it, you've demonstrated market share, you've demonstrated scalability before you're really even fully ramped up and running. So that's an opportunity as well. And that's kind of doing the backwards Uber Amazon model. You're not spending exorbitant amounts of cash, but you do have to spend a lot of time and effort on the consumer base beforehand. So it's a kind of a chicken before the egg argument, but without customers, there are no sales. Without sales, there is no revenue. So you have to play that in your mind.
Last question today. Dig South focuses very much on building a community across the region, and with the idea being that no one city, particularly in the South at this moment, can compete with Silicon Valley in terms of venture capital and talent, or sometimes New York, Boston, etc. However, as a region, collectively, there are a lot of advantages to building that kind of community that you were describing earlier. In your mind, does it matter today where you launch that company from? How important is that? And, we're all working remotely anyway. However, there are, advantages and disadvantages to different regions, different parts of the world. What's your kind of 30,000 foot take on that?
Sure. So, anyone who reads enough of Crunchbase or TechCrunch or whatever the quote unquote Silicon Valley style media is going to understand that if you go to a coffee shop 20 times, if you go to 20 different coffee shops every single day in Silicon Valley, you're going to bump into someone who is able to write checks for an early stage company. I mean, that's just what it is. It's so many people that I've talked to. It's just, they go to meetups, they go to things. I mean, that's just a great environment. I can't knock that. But we're seeing other areas grow in the same sense. Austin, Dallas, Houston, Texas are all sprouting up. Miami is sprouting up, especially for immigrants. Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina is sprouting up because of the SaaS community down there. Philadelphia is sprouting up because of Ben Franklin in 1776. And then New York City is the fintech capital of the frickin' globe. So I think if we're talking from an American perspective, it certainly depends on where you are, but it's your buy-in to the community and commitment to the community itself. So obviously in Silicon Valley, I could go into one coffee shop and say, I have an idea and maybe someone will listen to me. But the example that I gave is you have to generally go to 20 or 30 of these and buy in, pitch, explain, refine what you're saying. And then the buy-in comes in later. So generally, if you're in Silicon Valley or New York City, you're probably going to hit the bullseye more often than not. But it doesn't mean that without enough commitment or exploration in, let's say Texas or Tennessee or North Carolina or Florida, you will find it. And especially now that everything is digital, we're on an even playing field. So you can Google entrepreneur community local or entrepreneur community in New York, and you can attend those events. It's all digital. So the playing field is much more level now, but it's still about creativity and commitment to that. So again, you may find more investors in Silicon Valley or New York, but until you go and do it over and over and over again and find the events and the communities that resonate with you or give you what you need and vice versa, you're not going to get anything anyway. So utilize the digital environment in front of you. Don't be afraid to explore Silicon Valley or New York City or Miami-based meetups or things like that. If you're in the middle of America or in the deep South or whatever, just do it. What do you have to lose? Literally. And if you want to move, if you have a great idea, if you have the ability, if you want to take a flight whenever things are safer to open back up, take that chance as well. But make sure you understand the opportunities in front of you and the landscape around it and the commitment to that landscape that you have to give to get out of it.
Great. Nick Mancini with Oracle for Startups. Thank you for joining us today on South Pod. How can people get in touch with you?
They can email me at nick.mancini@oracle.com. or at Telegram. I'm at nmancini3. Feel free to give me a DM there as well. And I'm not very active on Twitter or anything like that. So email or Telegram probably the easiest.
Great. Thanks for being our guest today on Southpod. It's a pleasure to interview you and to partner with Oracle for Startups on Dig South Tech Summit and digsouth.com. I am Stanfield Gray signing off.